Welcome, everybody. I'm Tracy Crum. I'm the Director for Artistic Advancement at the Textile Center, and I'm multitasking. So if you see me going back and forth, I'm letting people into the meeting as we speak. Welcome to Art Speaks. This evening, we are thrilled to be hosting Rotem Tamir and her collaborators for Making as Catalyst for Remembering. Rotem's collaborators are Wendy Wustenberg and Mike Calway-Fagen, and I'll give them each a brief intro. I want to just let everybody on the session know that we will be using the chat for questions, and we will be taking questions at the end of the session. And I do sort through the questions in terms of whether or not they've been answered during the course of the session. With regard to sort of relevance to the conversation where it ends up before we enter the Q&A. And so please use your chat room. If you have any technical difficulties or anything like that, please use your chat room. Please keep yourselves muted. And I do have the screen share open, but I just want to let everybody know, please do not engage with screen sharing. It is for the purposes of Rotem, excuse me, to move forward with her presentation. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the presenters, the speakers this evening. Let's see, Rotem. Rotem is an Israeli artist who lives in Minneapolis. She teaches as an assistant professor of sculpture at the in the Department of Art at the U of M. Her work's been exhibited at venues including Locust Projects in Miami, the Harm Museum in Gainesville, Cav 16 Community Gallery for Contemporary Art in Tel Aviv, the BCA Center in Burlington, Vermont, and Artist House in Tel Aviv, among others. Rotem has been awarded residencies at Sculpture Space in Utica, Seven Below Arts Initiative in Burlington, Vermont, Arts OMI International Arts Center, and was featured in residence at ARC in Chattanooga. She received the Toby Devon Lewis Fellowship Award, the Artist Exhibition Grant from artistcontemporary.org in New York, among others. Her collaborators on this project were Wendy Wustenberg, who lives on Windswept Hill Farm, which is down in Faribault, right? Yep, down in the Faribault area.
Between Hampton and Farmington.
Oh, Farmington, that's it. Okay, I'm sorry, my bad. She lives with a menagerie that includes a flock of rare sheep, piles of salvaged material, studio spaces, and an endless supply of fine wool. A founding member of the North Star Farm Tour, she's currently designing a flex-use creativity center at Windswept Hill Farm that can welcome people to explore the farm's mission, awaken your creative spirit. And then our third collaborator this evening is Mike Calway-Fagen, who is an artist, writer, curator, and educator. He's now based in Tennessee. He's participated in numerous solo and group exhibitions and is currently co-curating a symposium and contributing a catalog essay to I Forgot to Laugh, Humor and Art, a traveling exhibition that's currently staged at the Pensacola Museum of Contemporary Art, as well as finishing up another curatorial project, Phenomenology of Outer Space, which opens at Soil Space in Seattle this fall. So with all that said, I got through it. I'm going to turn the session over to Rotem Tamir. There's a few more folks in the waiting room. And out. Thank you.
Tracy, thank you for the introduction. That's great. I am not multitasking, so I need to prepare my screen. Just a second. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, because you need to understand, I see my screen and all of a sudden I cannot see anyone. Tracy, thank you again for this lovely introduction and for hosting this event. I would like to thank the Textile Center for supporting this session. And of course, to Wendy and Mike, who agreed to come, who had a lot, who was very involved in this project. And I just feel very lucky that they agreed to come and share a little bit from their perspective about this work. So the talk for tonight, I titled it Making as a Catalyst for Remembering. And I'm going to focus today only on one work called Mattress Jiraiya that was originally made for the exhibition Teachable Moment for the Stovework Gallery in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which Mike curated. Jiraiya mean mattress in Judeo-Tripolitanian, which is a language that Jewish people spoke in Libya. So it's very similar in a way. It's not similar, but it's just like the same idea as many actually languages that Jewish people were speaking that have Hebrew letters, but it's actually not Hebrew, like Yiddish, for example. So from the title, it can give a clue a little bit about this, the story of this, the story that exists inside of this mattress. So when you come to the gallery space, you see a mattress on the floor. And in the booklet of the exhibition, there is a text, and it's saying, and it's written, "It is hard to fathom the amount of people, places, generation, and organizations that made it possible to produce this mattress. Each inquiry in the process brought about new people, insightful conversations, learning and teaching moments, as well as friendships. I will not be able to describe them all here, and I'm not even sure that this is the right platform to do so. When all is said and done, what I wish for you, the visitor, in this exhibition to experience is this object as is right now in this space, next to your body. Still, with respect and appreciation to the people, the places, and to the activities that beckoned them to the aid of this endeavor. This word cloud attempts to illustrate the complex network of relations that form as a result of the desire to make a handcrafted wool mattress. And next to that text, there is this flow chart, which combine people, places, and action that took place in the process of making this mattress. And this is a very important chart for me. And during this talk, I'm actually going to show it in different moments and highlight people and places and action that I'm going to focus on. So the process, so I should say that this is a process that I recently finished, and that means also that it's still, there is a lot of thoughts that I'm still processing it, that I'm actually wish to processing with you here in this talk. And I believe I can put all of those things I learned through this process in a couple of subjects that I will actually talk more during this talk. So one is material and action as an interweaving thread between generations, cultures, and places. I want to propose that making this mattress is a little bit similar to making a big meal with many people from different places that's coming together. The significance of making things by hand. I feel that I should say that I don't have anything against technology, quite the opposite, but I do think that, but I do believe that there are things that that the old traditional craft still have a lot to teach us, and I'm curious about that. The senses as a stimulator of recurring memories how memory coming to be, like how things came all of a sudden out of nowhere, right? Like how the smell, how touch, how different senses impact us and what it brings with it. And the possibility of coping with trauma through makings. And I will talk about it more as I move. This work starts from remembering, from a memory. And before I said what memory came, I think I should say what was the environment in which this memory came. And it was a pandemic. The pandemic just started. I just recently moved to Minnesota, which for me, it's a new place with my family and my 5-year-old son. And his school, his new school stopped, right? He's at home. And although we really try to make sure that everything feels great, I start to noticing on his behavior that he feels that something is not quite right. And of course, as a mother, you know, my instinct was that I want to make something that will make him comfort. I want to do something that will make him feel that everything is okay. And for me, the most comfortable moment is actually what you see here in the picture. It's a ceremony. It's the way we celebrate Passover in my family. As you see, I have a pretty big family, and we actually celebrate Passover in the same way my Libya grandma used to celebrate in Tripoli. So they carry this tradition of, for example, sitting on mattresses and certain ritual that even in Israel, it's feel quite different. But for me, this moment, this ceremony was kind of like a place where I feel the most comfort and surrounded by, you know, people I love. And as a mother, you know, and looking at my child, I of course I knew that I cannot bring him his family. I knew that he have a big family that love him, but I cannot bring the family. But I was asking myself, okay, so is there a way for me to create an object for my son that will, in a way, how I would say it, will hold that comfort, will tell that something in this object will tell the story of where he came from, and he will feel at home. And one of the most significant in this Passover ceremony was sitting on mattresses. My grandma moved all the sofa from the house to one small room. And in that, you know, it was a small room and a lot of people enter, and all her house was full of mattresses. The mattresses will symbolize comfort, and the time is stopped. There is no time. You come in here, and we actually was sitting there the whole night, you know, small kids, big kids, like everyone together. And then I later discovered that my grandma was actually do the mattresses herself. That was a handmade wool mattresses. And I remember this feeling, this, you know, good feeling of sitting all those mattresses. And this is how I decided that I wanted to do a handmade wool mattress in the same way my grandma did, which of course I don't know, and she passed away long ago. So this is how this project came to be, and I would like to read you a quote that I think very much connected, which I like, from The Spell of the Census. To hear a story told and retold in one's childhood, and to recount that tale in turn when one, now inflected by the patterns of one's own experience and the rhythm of one's own voice, is to actively preserve the coherence of one's culture. The practical knowledge, the moral patterns and social taboos, and indeed the very language or manner of speech of any non-written culture maintain themselves primarily through narrative chants, myth, legend and trickster tales that is through the telling of stories. So in a way, of course, I wanted to keep that story and move it to my child. So the issue is, it's really great that I wanted to make a mattress in the way my grandma did, but I'm in Minnesota, right? Very far away from Israel. This is pandemic, so I cannot travel. And this kind of craft, it's not something that you can learn from a book or from the screen, right? You actually need people to show you. So I decided that I'm going to look for a local shepherd. And this is actually how I found Wendy. So this is the first time Wendy and I met. I came to the farm, and Wendy here showed me how she opened for me a fleece, and she explained me how when you're shearing, I think I have a video, how when they shearing the sheep, they shearing it in one, how to say it, like as one part. So when you open the fleece, you can actually see where the part that came from the neck and the part that came from the belly and so on. I will let Wendy in a minute actually tell the story of our meeting, our first time we met, from her perspective. But I would just say that when I met Wendy, and it was such a lovely meeting, like we immediately connected, and she immediately, like, I told her the story of what I wanted to do, and she said, come here, let's do it together, let's figure it out. I want to help. And there was something so amazing about this meeting, that it was very clear to me that adapting to my new place, it's part of this project. And later on, I also realized that, this is also the story, the part of the story of my grandma, because my grandma moved from Libya to Israel. She also migrated, and she also need to adapt. When she did the wool mattresses, she need to adapt to new technique, new craft technique, new different wool and so on. So I started to realize this kind of like development. And this is how me and Wendy start to work together. And I remember that Wendy asked me, how much wool you need? And I said, well, I don't know. I never did it before. And she said, well, maybe you need all of it. So all of a sudden, me and Wendy, we found ourselves with, I think it's 250 pounds of wool that we need to clean, we need to picking and washing and carding and all that before we even start dealing with the mattress. And I want to propose in this talk that this amount of time and this amount of laboring that was involved in making this project, it's actually was play an important role in the friendship and the conversation, the thorough conversation that we had during the process, that I will share with you a little more in a few minutes. But I want to ask Wendy if she wants maybe to, I bet, Wendy, you want to say something about the first time we met.
Well, over the years, hundreds, if not thousands of people have found their way to our farm. It usually starts with a text or a call, can we come? And invariably we say yes. In that regard, Rotem was like everyone else, coming, usually people are coming for one skein of wool or perhaps a few ounces. They don't usually want the entire crop. But in truth, she was like no other person who's come. By now you've realized it would be impossible to say no to the opportunity to work with her. We quickly found ground on this story. The idea of connecting to a generation past, childhood memories, in a pandemic, seeking comfort and community, even when we're supposed to be apart. we were standing in the driveway with my daughter Lauren, going through fleece after fleece with her reaching out with her hands to hold these fibers in a way that was so eminently respectful that I realized that we had this golden opportunity to make a partnership. Neither of us knew what we were doing. We were both very comfortable with that. We created a master class in fine art, from which I gained immeasurably. And ultimately, the dream of our farm has been to be a welcoming space for people to come with an idea, to pursue that idea, sometimes exclusively here, sometimes in collaboration with others. And this project was an extraordinary learning community opportunity. Many of Rotem's needs to know required us finding other people, skills, going through books, sourcing projects. We built equipment, which will, be touched upon a bit in the presentation. But what we got out of this together was nothing short of family. We landed on language together too. And I think it was in this early first conversation that we were seeking to fulfill her wish that she could create something that would feel as though you wanted to dwell there. Dwell was one of the words we explored a lot in our conversation because it implies deeper than just home, deeper than just being somewhere. And ultimately, I got to watch my friend Rotem make Minnesota her home and dwell here in a very fine way, and us with her.
Thank you, Wendy. So as Wendy said, one of the things that was fascinating me, well, I should say like that, I was wondering like how this community came, and the next section I actually want to talk about that. And as you see in the flow chart, there is more people, and it's actually also a technical thing, right? One of the things that I realized that we cannot wash that amount of fleece alone. It's just impossible. So we literally need more people, and people came, which that was one of the things that really interested me, like how this project attract people that just came without asking for anything back. Just okay, let's enter into that. Here you also see Marja, my intern, who really want to dig into that project. She didn't have to. And these images, actually, it's from the first day of washing, of the first day that we are going to figure it out how we're going to wash the fleece. I should say that although Wendy have a farm a farm with sheep that meant to that produce yarn, beautiful yarn, she and correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but she actually never washed and did the whole process in the farm. It's not a common thing. So we literally needed to figure it out. So in that day that I'm showing you here, it's the first day that we are coming together. We know it's going to be at least like a full day, morning till night. So I'm bringing my son because it's weekend, and I need to do something like he's there. And later on, I will also talk about all this kind of like thought that I had about how to involve Oliver in this project. But this is a special day for me because I didn't know what to expect from that day. And there was very special moment during that day. So for example, when I brought Oliver for the first time to the farm here, we're walking around and stuff like that. Wendy is always, you never find Wendy completely. She always somewhere doing something, okay? So I'm walking around with Oliver and I'm showing him the farm. It's a beautiful setting, I should say that. That's also, I think, something that very kind of like driven all of us wanted to be there as much as possible. But all of a sudden, Wendy is coming on the tractor, and Oliver, like my son, never never see Wendy before, and he's a very shy person. And Wendy's looking at him and say, "Hey, hi, Oliver." And Oliver just, she's saying, "Do you want to come?" And Wendy and Oliver immediately jump, "Don't look at me anymore," jump on the tractor, and they left for 2 hours. I didn't see them. And to see that moment, first of all, it's reminding me a very comfort moment in my memory with my grandma who had a farm. And I remember that moment. And that's something that will come back again and again. Like, I am very far away from what I call home, but at the same time, moments are coming that really reminding me, bringing back to the most comfort moment in my life. So see my son like that with Wendy was something very special. The other thing that you will see, I will show you the video in a second. This is a video when Oliver already learned to drive on the tractor, and they see me, so he gave me a ride. And then we see Marja coming. So Marja, she's a runner. So she used the farm, this beautiful setting, to run a lot of miles. And this is another thing that interests me, that each one of us who participate in this project use or look at this farm through their eyes, right? And this farm was what they wanted to be. So I would just give you a video. I was always lucky that Wendy always like took some photos.
She's not going to believe it when she sees who's driving the tractor. She's the runner. She comes, Martha Ustra, on her long run. Isn't it pretty? Look at see our tractor driver? It's Oliver. There you go.
So one of the things that I was thinking a lot about is like all the things that happen while we're washing. Like, most of the thing that we needed to do is to wash. And it's, you know, very laboring things and that take time, but during that time things happen, right? Like Wendy had a birthday, right? So we celebrate together, or like many things happened. And at some point I realized that actually what I give Oliver and all of it, like all of my family in a way, you know, it's really became like a family, I should say, you know, the farm and Wendy family. And I really think that this project wouldn't work if I didn't see how, if this farm, this place wasn't such a you know, such a comfortable and comfort space for Oliver and for all of us, actually. And that was something very special. And I just, Mike, you were very quiet the whole time. I'm wondering if you want to add some things here, because you were always, I remember me sharing with you stuff, you know. Mike couldn't be present. He was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but as a friend and curator and a very interesting person, I just on a regular basis share with him, and we were in a conversation about it. Mike, would you like to?
Sure. I mean, I think the way Rotem's describing, or has begun to describe the process, the carding and the washing, et cetera, and the kind of moving towards, I don't know, a destination, in a lot of ways mirrored the construction of, and vice versa, the construction of the kind of community that revolved around the making of the piece. So the piece was originally discussed for an exhibition that took place in Tennessee. It actually just came down, Teachable Moment. That show, in kind of brief description, was meant to challenge most of us are familiar with a teachable moment. I think it's something that's been come up in the news a number of times, but effectively the exhibition was meant to sort of challenge the moment or moments as teachable. Is knowledge exchanged or is information exchanged in such a abbreviated fashion? Similarly, does learning take place between two people? In other words, does the artist-curator relationship happen as kind of an individual, isolated exchange? No. In reality, our communication is predicated on other relationships that we have outside of what we bring to the table, either skills that we've learned through other people, stories. All these things have a network of histories unto themselves. And so what we bring to the table is really a kind of endless collaboration that spans across time and space. And so I guess to bring that back around, I felt like that really mirrored Rotem's piece, as well as the kind of conceptual underpinnings of teachable moment, this kind of non-hierarchical, communal, care-based relationship building.
Can I add just in one other thing about these three pictures? The two that are shot inside our studio, the person you're not seeing in those pictures is Shiaki O'Brien, who's well known to Minnesota fiber artist. She is well known for her Saori weaving. She was our guest. She was good enough to come with looms, and we all wove together for a day. It was a bit of a creative sabbatical day, if you will, where we all, here's Marcia Ostra holding up her piece off to the left, and we became all excited about some use of fiber in an entirely different context than the work that was before us. And it came at just the right time. It was the end of September. Our job was to process 250 pounds of fiber in 4 weeks, doing it in small batches for which we had been building equipment. And we came up with a method that took about 72 hours to do 30 pounds. So there was just constant activity going on in and around the studio. But I think that was the day that we did all have a teachable moment together, and it put us all on common ground, which certainly was an upper for all of us who got to sit with these well-known worldwide artists who were also learning right alongside of us.
Do you mind if I add one thing to that?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Piggyback Wendy's comment. Yeah, I think, like, to distill the project, what Wendy's identifying and what I was, flailing at trying to describe is how the project, at least on its face, seems to be about quantities in some ways. 80 pounds of wool, number of hours spent in labor, the past, the future, the present, quantities. But when in fact, what was really taking place was qualities, and those things as being immeasurable. So instead of a kind of quantification of qualities, maybe a quality is a quantity in its own right.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually great, because it's led me to you kind of like touch on this this part, like this whole process. There is a very practical part to it. Like when we're washing the wool, and we mention it because that was the most long process that we needed to do, and the most laboring thing. You know, like there is things like there is a specific temperature that the water need to be, which, as you know, can be sometimes challenging in Minnesota when it's so cold. So, and then the wool need to be inside, the fleece need to be inside for a specific amount of time, and so on. So there is a very practical aspect that when it's need to be done, it's need to be done, and there is no moment. And one of the things that I noticed, like, well, before that I would say, and with this moment, right, there was also those moments, which is just like pure quiet, and you know, we wait, and this wool is and breathing and so on. It's just like there is also those moments. So there is like a running moment that things have to be done in a certain amount of time, and then there is a moment that you just need to wait. And I think one of the things that interests me is to see how we move and talk around that process. I think one of the reason that a lot of meaningful conversation happen was because we always had this anchor of washing the wool, and in a minute I will explain it a little more. So while I'm washing it, if I know that we are speaking to many people here who actually have a lot of experience with textile. So if you were with raw fleece, you know that it's smell, it's very oily, it's right, like it's very rough and physical, all right? And what happened to me, while I'm constantly on a regular basis, right? I'm touching that material, I'm touching it, I'm mixing it, I'm like all the time with this. And all of a sudden, I start to realize that one of the most horrifying images actually that coming to my mind, which I really try to calm them down. And Wendy will be able to say, because I actually didn't tell Wendy anything about it. But what I start to, the memory that came to my mind was actually images from the Holocaust. And I need here to step back for a second and explain something, and forgive me if it might be hard for certain people. So I just wanted to say I'm going to talk a little bit about imagery from the Holocaust. I maybe should mention that today it's a Holocaust Remembering Day, which is, it's not something that I plan, but I do want to mention it. It's Yom HaShoah. So it was hard for me to understand it, but at some point I realized that the images that coming to my mind is, no, I should say, I should go a little bit back and explain. As someone who grew up in Israel in the 80s, the way back then, the way in Israel, they thought it's the best way to educate the children about the Holocaust, and making sure the most terrifying thing was that it will happen again. So the idea was, we need to teach, no matter what your age, we need to teach you about it, that you will feel like it's happened to you, and you will never forget, right? You will never forget in order for it not to happen. So as a child, I saw a lot of horrifying images. And at some point I realized, when I walking with mass amount of hair, that the only time I saw that amount of hair before was in the imagery that they show me as a child from the Holocaust, right? When the Nazi was cut people's hair before they go to the gas jam. So it was this dissonance. I wanted to, like, when I said in the beginning, coping with trauma, how by walking by hand helping you coping with trauma, this is the moment when I wanted to kind of like point on this. I think also the way for me to cope with it was that I actually touched the wool, and it's very soft and calm. So like working with this calm material and having this memory coming, I think that was, you know, it's something that I'm keep thinking about it. I'm still processing it. And then the thing is that if it's not enough with this dissonance between the comforting material and this memory that came to my mind, at some point the wool was transformed, because after it's clean, right, and you card it, all of a sudden it became such a beautiful hair that really remind me my grandma hair. Like my grandma had this iconic Wendy braids, right?
Like a braid, yes, a braid.
Yeah, she had like iconic braids. And for me, one of the memories that I remember her like opening her braids and brushing it, right? And it was so beautiful. And all of a sudden, this hair is coming to be like my grandma hair. And I would like to read you a quote, and it's saying, an object or place achieves concrete reality when our experience of it is total. That is through all the senses, as well as with the active and reflective mind. I will move on, and maybe I should say some things about the role of Oliver, because of my son in this project, because after all, this object is for him. So it's true that the object, the mattress, is sent to an exhibition, but the way I look at it is that the exhibition is one stop in the longer life of the mattress, which then become a utilitarian object. Then it will actually be a mattress for my son. So I start to ask myself, you know, like how, what it means to do an object for someone, right? Like, am I supposed to make all the decision? Like how this object will become belong to him, will make him comfort, right? So of course I start to realize that the family and being in the farm and see the process and start to appreciate the wool and start to appreciate all the people that's coming together to help make his mattress, really make it meaningful. The other thing is also, I start to get him involved in the process. Wool, it's a very attractive thing. The nice thing also about this craft that it's that many of the processing can happen, and I'm sure many of you know, it can happen in the domestic environment, right? So I can bring the carding, which is a very nice, it's not noisy, nothing, you know, you do it by hand, and I can do it at home when I you know, cooking and doing other things. And what did I notice is that Oliver immediately attracted to it. And this was an opportunity for me to spend time with him and tell him like stories from where I came from, who was my grandma, why I do that mattress for him. And this is a moment when my husband just decided to video us when he wanted to help me card. And you will not understand, it's in Hebrew, so.
זה נראה לי כמו טוויב או משהו. בדיוק. כי זה היה צמר הכבשים, זה היה השיער של הכבשים, נכון? והן נמצאות בחוץ ואוכלות בחוץ. קשה לעזור קצת? לפעמים יש יותר מדי, ואז צריך להיזהר. תזיז את הראש.
We are run out of time, but I wanted to say here, it's that this is a moment when, because he's spending time with me and we do something, one of the things that I noticed that doing something by hand, let us tell stories. And this kind of like making by hand allow us to bring back and say things, you know, that sometimes it's hard to process otherwise. You know, my son don't have patience, you know, like he care about the twigs that have inside and he want to roll it. But during that time, I can tell him things that he will never, you know, want to listen to, and it's enter into him. And that was something that I noticing, and I'm still thinking about that. And this is just other example, when I'm coming to the farm and Oliver is coming with me and there is a lot of wool around, right? So I need to card, and Oliver take the wool and do what he liked the most, right? He liked birds and nests now. So he make a nest out of the wool, right? So he start to own this material. This material becomes something that he care about and he know about through his body. And speaking of wool, I just wanted to say a couple of things, like just to mention the benefit of wool. I do think that it's important, like that we show the material we work with affect the process as well, right? So some of the benefit of wool, right? It reacts with your body. With wool is also able to react with any changes in your body temperature. It's lower heart rate, so it's actually calm you down. It's hypoallergic. It's absorb harmful pollinates. Dust mites don't like wool. Wool is naturally flame resistant. Wool is naturally renewable fiber, so it's eco-friendly and sustainable, which is something that I very much care about. And I think it's also I believe there is an effect on our body as well. So moving on, we finally figured out the cleaning process, and then we figured out that I don't know how to sew a mattress. I don't have any idea. And my uncle, who is actually in this chart, and my father probably could help me realize it, but again, they cannot do it online, right? So I remember me telling Wendy, well, Wendy, okay, we figured out the wool, we will have wool, it will be okay, but how we are going to do the mattress? And she said, and as Wendy usually did, Wendy usually, like, you know, she was quiet, she was listening. And then a couple of days later, she called me and said, I have a present for you. I found someone who can teach us how to do the mattress. And this is to the left, you can see, this is how I met Larry Garner. And I came to Garner Upholstery. And you know, when we came to Larry, and again, I wanted to mention that maybe Wendy, you have more things to share because I wasn't involved in that conversation. But from what I know from you, you kind of share with Larry the project. You told him what that I wanted to do a mattress for my child, and Larry volunteered to. He was just welcoming us to his shop, and said, you know, he also didn't do a mattress, but he have this knowledge of upholsterer, right? And he said, you know, together we can figure it out. Please come. And I have to say that he never asked something in return. He literally just welcomed us to his shop. And I didn't know what to expect. Of course, I don't know him, but one of the things that was very special when I came to Larry's shop is that the minute I enter in, I felt at home. Now it's really weird because you need to understand, Larry, like, okay, I should say I felt at home. I felt like in my uncle's shop. So I need to say that I came from a family, my father's side, who I influenced from, and I mention a lot today. They came from a big family, and all the brother and sister, you know, they never had a lot of money, but each one of them knew how to do something very well. So there was a carpenter, and there was a metalsmith, and there was a mechanic, which is my father, right? So every time something is happening, everyone can help. There is all the people who know how to do everything, right? So when I came to Larry, like, I literally, like, it was really surprising me that I feel like in my uncle's shop, although my uncle not look anything similar Larry, right? He don't have this casket hat and he don't wear the overall, and that was something that was very special. I am wondering if maybe it's because it's something like it's a share values that maybe we shared, or share value that may be related to craftsmanship. But that's something that interests me. And I would like to share with you just a video of us working together, trying to figure things out, which was along the project. It was all the time was moment like that of learning to do new things together.
Creative in this, but even if you had somebody else to help you or what, and you hold that right there tight. Now watch when I pull this.
Whoa. You cannot see anything.
Yeah. It's called a blind stitch. You're not supposed to see it when you're done. So once you can go, you know, like 3 inches and then tighten that up.
Wow.
So we'll go, and it's okay that it loosens up a little bit here.
And then now to leave my hand or still?
No, you can let go now, and
It's
then
just
I'll
like
go,
when you
just
need to
when you're
tighten it.
tightening it. Because if I pull it,
My question is like, how do you know the line? You see, like.
I'm just staying about guessing, about a
Yeah.
½ inch, doesn't
Okay.
that? See, if
Okay.
you're like, if you're not holding this end and I pull it, see what it does?
Yes, I see. I see.
So with somebody holding that and I snug it up,
Gotcha.
it does
Yes.
the nice seam. And there are tools for that, but I think you're gonna wanna do it more just by hand.
Like that. Yes. Can I try, Larry?
Yes, you're gonna do this.
All
You're
right.
gonna do this. So it'll
Okay.
take you a while, whether you do it here, you do it wherever. You're just gonna go away.
So so this is me and Larry. We decided that, you know, we will do some small scale mattress to figure things out, and this is how, you know, in the end. But again, like one of the things that I noticing repeating that keep repeat is that the making is kind of like anchor us and allow us always to go somewhere else and tell a story and share a story about our past, about where we came from. That's sometimes really different, you know, like me and Larry could talk about, all of a sudden talked about politics that we might disagree with each other, but it was totally okay. And there was something about there that I kind of like keep thinking about, you know, how the making give us this platform to meet, to get to know each other and build this kind of relationship.
We did have a wonderful day there. That little mattress that they made as a sample took 4 entire fleeces. Rotem just stuffed that and stuffed it and stuffed it. She and Larry had looked at some Israeli YouTube videos together, and they realized in order to get you know, a mattress that was 4 inches in a sample, she ultimately wanted 7 to 8 inches in her big installation. And that was the day on the way home, I called a shearer and arranged to do my first ever fall shearing to get another 140 pounds of fleece because I was worried we didn't have enough.
Wendy, I'm happy actually you pop in, because the next part is actually how the Textile Center and how Tracy was entered into this project, Lucky Us, right?
Lucky
so
us.
the natural dye and the fabric start to happen. Would you like to tell a little bit about that?
Well, sure. So Marcia and Rotem and I were looking at fabric shops because that was the next job. Was we explored the possibility of weaving fabric at the farm, which proved entirely problematic. The timeline was too short. So fortunately, Marcia knew a lot about textiles in Europe, and many of the mattresses are made from a very fine herringbone twill that is done in France. So priceless fabric had been acquired by Rotem. The day that we were meeting, though, the next step was she wanted to dye it. She had a vision of dyeing that would not leave her. There was something just speaking to her about color and natural dyes. But again, here we are, we don't know what we're talking about, and it's lunch. So I said, I'm going to call Tracy Crum and see if she's home. And by golly, she was. For those who may, those of you who came through the Textile Center website, let me just put in a big pitch for this amazing group of people and resource. Tracy immediately said yes. It took not a fraction of the story before she, who is also an enabler of other people's vision, said, yes, I will absolutely reach out to CC Lewis. We will help you with your dye questions. We'll help you shortcut learning about the protocol of prepping the fabric, receiving the dyes. And then in addition, you will see big pots. This was a gift. You need big pots to work with bolts and yards of fabric and dyes. And here's Oliver in this darling picture that I just love so much. So thank you to the Textile Center. It was a pandemic. The dye lab would have been a beautiful place to take all of this for learning, but we had to come back to my studio. To the left, you see a tannin bath. My first experience with tannin baths for prepping fabric for dyes. Rotem had to go and do something with Oliver and left me with this incredibly detailed protocol for working with the mordant for the fabric. Aluminum, we were working with aluminum. It was a highly caustic material. That's me in the middle, optimistically telling her I survived the experience. Everything was down to 50 grams in a certain order at a certain time with certain temperatures. And to be perfectly honest with you, I was terrified that I would be the one to ruin this fabric, but I didn't. So it's a success story in the end. Thanks to the Textile Center all the way through. It was the next day that Rotem came back. To the left, you see sumac that she harvested from the farm. She also had some she and Oliver had harvested. That went in a cheesecloth, then went outside to sit in one of those pots on a propane stove that we have. You see where the sumac, the gray color, has wicked up into a sampler that she had made as she experimented with various natural dyes. She had this constant image of ticking on a fabric, which was typical in the Middle East and typical also in North America. I remember growing up with ticking on pillowcases that was commonly done. So the people who were sewing would be able to see the straight seams. I felt very connected in that moment with my grandmother, my mother, and their constant attention to making sure that pillows were refreshed with fresh ticking and fluff those feathers and clean them and put them back. That's what her grandmother had done in the Middle East. And Marcia knew that in the Netherlands, where she was born, they would often wash that wool in the sea. So this was the day that we were really going back 2 generations back to handcrafting and dyeing. And I watched Rotem through this day, working with her hands down in those dye vats in the outdoor kitchen that we have. And this is a scene from watching the madder root steeping in this other big pot. And the hands to the left are hers as she's pulling this fabric up. She was very unhappy through most of the morning and early afternoon. She just wasn't getting the color she wanted, and she would kind of, with her, clucking her tongue, like, when is it going to turn red? And there's a video here for you to see of a moment. I'm so glad I caught this on video, because you get to watch an artist satisfying herself and explaining why. So do you want to just let that go?
Sure.
Look at that. So talk to me. What is your eye seeing? Is the what? What is your eye seeing in that? Here? Mm-hmm. What do you mean? The color. What is the color? the color is one of the things that surprised me. Where to even start? Okay, where to start? All right. You know, when I was a student in Betzalel, first year BFA student, in the first year, you learn, no one asks you what you want to learn. All right, they define art. They give you the best teacher for painting, the best sculptors, the best, and you are going to learn what they said. That's what you are going to learn. And I have an amazing painter, like kind of like old fashioned, that taught us like the tradition from the 15th century about like how to choose your fabric and how to do hide. It's called actually it's like a hide glue that you put on the fabric, because that's the best kind of like how to say,
Like a gesso treatment. Yeah.
exactly. It's not, that's the thing, it's not gesso. It's like half breathing, half not, exactly what you need for oil paint. And then how you make your own oil paint. And people, of course, didn't necessarily did it, but I took it and I just bought all the pigments and I learned how to do all like by myself. And it's produced color that you can just not, you cannot see. It's clear that it's not something that you bought, you know? And that's the same about this red. This red have a soul, you know? It was a flower. It was grow somewhere. People, you know, like it's just like, it's so rich. It's so deep. There is so many layers to it, you know? And you actually have feeling with it. Like this color actually vibrate your body. Something that, you know, chemical color will not do the same. Yes, it came from a plant. It came from roots. So this essence of the roots is still in the color. So
I would like to believe that the blossoms you picked here helped a little bit.
exactly, sure. You know, it's so, and it's just
Oh, that's extraordinary.
you cannot cheat. You cannot cheat that.
That's the deepest color of all the samples.
Yes,
Much.
that's very true. So we need to see if we have more water.
Okay, let me go take the temperature.
Which of course, as you saw, we immediately, we talk about, right, like this color, and all of a sudden, okay, we need to check the temperature, right? It was always like that. And sorry, Wendy, can I just add a few things?
This is absolutely your presentation.
I would just say that I just want to share two things. The first thing is like just to emphasize that it wasn't clear to me why I insist on dye the fabric myself, but it was clear to me that it's very important. When Tracy came in and the textile center, you know, it felt very, it's like, okay, you know, thanks God, we have someone in the back that actually know what they're doing. But on the other hand, it was a pandemic. So Tracy could just give us like a really long, you know, very detail of what we need to do, which we understood mostly nothing, right, from what she wrote. So we are completely amateur and we need to produce that color and you know, and there is nothing else. It's have to be that color. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and that was something, you know, we just need to accept it and like hope that it will be all right, right? And it was all right in the end. But I also want to mention, if I can take you a little, if I can take you to the beginning, when I showed the mattress and what was written, if you remember, for the person who actually came to the exhibition space, what I wish for them is to experience the mattress. What I deeply believe in is that all these stories, all these people that came together during the process of making this object made this object meaningful. And I do want to claim that when you are standing, you are standing in front of this object, or I should say next to this object, there is a relationship between your body and this object. And this is something that very interests me, the relationship we have with certain object and certain object we don't have. So I'm sorry that we get longer than I wish. So I hope everyone is still okay. It's hard to watch the screen the whole time. But we are getting into closer, and this is where, after all is done, eventually I need to take all of this material, the fabric and the carded wool, and bring it to my studio and sew the mattress myself. Because it was pandemic, I couldn't enter anyone into the studio, so I literally needed to do it myself, and it was a very special moment, right? I was alone in the space, but absolutely not alone, right? And this is images from the studio. Before I saw everything together, I wanted to do those lines on the fabric. The line on the fabric represent a couple of things, the reference at least a couple of things. One of the things is the traditional fabric I saw in my grandma old picture when they took, it's a traditional fabric that was wrapped themselves within Libya, and it was with those stripes. The other thing is that I wanted to do those straps by hand. So I walk, you see, it's completely imperfect line. And that was important for me. It's like a mark that's saying, you know, like I did it, I was here, and it's by hand. It will never be perfect. And I embrace the fact that it's not perfect. I don't want it to be perfect. And well, and of course, it's also reference it's also, you know, it's also reference in a way the abstract painting that you know, as an artist, and the way I educated, you know, I educate on this kind of minimalist abstract painting, which I have controversial, I have some relationship with it, you know, like a love and hate relationship. Anyway, moving on. I don't have much to say besides showing you that, and maybe I would actually would love if Mike want to maybe share some things from his point of view on the experience. This is actually where things really coming together a minute before it's going to the show, right, Mike? Before you see it. Mike, can you hear us? Oh, you are mute.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just realized that I was muted, and so you probably didn't hear anything I just said.
No, we didn't.
Sorry about that. I was beginning to describe the development of your project simultaneous to or parallel to the development of the exhibition that I was assembling. Were both rather risky, I think, in that we're very much kind of engaged in the moment and not as concerned, although obviously there's a certain degree of concern, as concerned with the destination. So there was a kind of embeddedness in process, in touch, in you know, the kind of tactile quality of the material and of making, which in many ways mirrored, I think, like our exchanges. There was a kind of tactility in, I don't know, the vulnerability exchange between curator and artist, and maybe, you know, a certain amount of generosity in how much you allowed me into your process. And then, I don't know, we both seem to give one another a certain amount of permission to kind of screw around and see where we ended up. And I think that sense of experimentation or imagination, or letting, imagination maybe run more wild than we're generally allowed when producing work for an exhibition, was analogous to, the way I was trying to rethink teachable moments. And even the way, maybe your project contended with time. This project took so much time, and in its development, in the number of hours committed, in the acquisition of materials, no one's talked about the sheep yet, but they took a while to get to where they could be sheared. There's a lot of time involved. And typically, I think as artists, we think about time in terms of the production of meaning. So in order for, say, a painting to mean something, there has to be time involved. And I think there's another way to maybe look at that equation. And instead of time producing meaning, this thing meant something. It just took time to reveal it.
I think that's a very good point, because through the presentation, it might seems to people who is here that I knew all along that it should be a mattress, but in fact, it wasn't the case. It came from a mattress, and I didn't know originally. I actually thought it might be some kind of a object sculpture. I really didn't know how it's going to look like. And I remember, and I remember Wendy always asked me, okay, so how is it going to look like? Just trying to imagine how much wool we need. And I said, I don't know. I need that time. I need to, spend that time with the material. And I remember me and you talk, and you kind of like embrace that, you agree, you understood that this is part of the process, not knowing how things will look like in the end. And it's changed all the time. And at some point, I remember it actually was, again, happened as a result of a conversation, this time with my partner, Omri, which I remember that we talked that night after a long day of working at the farm. And through a conversation with him, I realized that it has to be a mattress. It needs to be a mattress, and it needs to be a mattress that eventually will go to Oliver. With this, as simple as it might sound, right? Are you taking a picture of us?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
So
Postarity's sake.
No, that's great. So yeah, I think that not knowing was very much was important, and also, and then the time and working with the hand was kind of like bring this kind of like reveal the information, reveal what it needs to be.
Rotem, can you just also share the conversation you had when you called back to talk to your uncle, that you did discover some ancestry with the dyeing?
Sure. So when I finished, so my uncle was also involved, I wanted to ask him, my uncle, Yaakov Tamam, who is the only person in the family that still born and raised in Libya and moved to Israel when he was 13. So he remembered a lot of things, and he kind of like helped me and shared with me information. And when I finished, I show him this, and he, and he was so proud, which was so great. He was so proud. He couldn't believe I actually succeeded to do a mattress that looked exactly like the mattress that my grandma did. And from his point of view alone, because I'm not next to the family, right? He's not aware for all the people that helped me here. But then my father told him that I also dyed the fabric. And he said, and he couldn't believe, he was amazed. And he told to my father, do you know that we came from a family that dye for their living? They did they dyed fabric for their living. And my father even didn't know that. And that was something that was really strike me because, you know, because I was taught, because there is a lot of part in my history, in my family history that is missing, you know, from different reasons. And think about that, I kind of like, is it maybe like a certain knowledge passing in the DNA, right? Like that's something that really started to interest me, right? So that was a really special moment. Yes, for sure. Thank you, Wendy. So with that story, I will just finish with bring us back to the farm and to the sheep who give us this beautiful wool, right? That without it, it's not. I think, Wendy, you are actually in the farm right now. Mike is somewhere, I believe, in the East Coast, right? And I will just open it. Please forgive me for running. You know, the presentation was longer than I expected. But if you still have some patience and you want to ask questions, I just want to open it for everyone. Thank you.
If folks have questions, you can add them to the chat. We did have a question. Can you, how many sheep gave their fleece to the project?
I just saw Martha Bird's question. Hello, Martha.
Great.
We had 36 in the flock when we did our spring shearing. 2 rams. We had some 11 lambs from the year before, and then the production ewes and fiber wethers. It's a flock of Leicester sheep, English Leicester and blue-faced Leicester, with a few crosses that have come in from a foster Shetland that we took in some years ago, and she's done some marvelous things with fiber. So we harvested 247 pounds, and for those, and with them, basically we usually ship that off to a mill. Most recently, Catherine Ashley Wright at Utopia Mill in Lafarge, Wisconsin, has been a partner in also then custom dyeing. We have fiber artists who will come here and want to have a custom dye done, and Catherine will work with me to accomplish that. And so just to give you a flavor of it, you know, typically that processing would take 3 to 6 months and be about $3,600 on average to process the fiber that way. That wasn't going to work in this case, obviously. This was about hands-on work. And we also had 4 weeks to get it done, as I think was mentioned. So I did quite a bit of networking to talk to people about various techniques in scouring fiber, and in different ways that it's done in the Middle East versus here. And we landed on a method of our own. Then we sheared again in the fall, as I said, the first ever half-year fleece. So these are longer fibered animals. Typically we'll get a fiber length of like anywhere from 5 to 9 to 10 inches on a full year fleece. And the half year fleece shearing, all the fiber was 4 to 6 inches. And that is actually still sitting, waiting for the next crazy idea that Rotem has. We are not done working together, we decided, and it's been a grand experience.
Wendy, a couple folks, if you would share out, if it's okay, I'm going to put the Windswept Hill Farm. What contact information can I share?
So we actually are on the Textile Center website as a business member, and
that is spectacular.
Isn't it just spectacular? Everyone should be a business member of Textile Center. Really, I mean, I want to put in a push for joining Textile Center if you haven't. What a community, and where would I be without it? It's been a place for classes for me to attend. My son Russell attended, my daughters attended. You know, it's a place where we can call. Tracy, I just really have to say, and to you and to Cece and anybody else you looped into this, what a gift to have so much help from you.
Well,
I think Mike wanted to, sorry, I think Mike wanted to ask a question. I just see in this chat.
I'd love to, if that's appropriate. I mean, it's an appropriate question, but no, one of the comments referred to your research being excellent. And I always think that's an interesting term to use for a number of reasons. But I think generally we associate research, whoever that is, I associate research with science, let's say, or something seemingly more rigid in its analysis. Do you, and by extension, we take science, or folks tend to take science more seriously, say, than art. How do you see research, or this idea of research, playing into your work? And is art itself a research tool? But what constitutes research, I guess?
Well, it's interesting for me that you ask about this, because for years, I think there is different reason how my research became, how my processes became what it became, right? One of the reason I have to admit, it's connected to my mom, because my mom, she is a scientist. She is a chemist engineer and material engineer, I think, if I translate it from Hebrew. And you know, and she never, like, for years, she didn't understood what I'm doing, right? So for me, I try to develop like a way, like a research kind of method that she will understand in a way. But having saying that, at some point I get over it, right? And my mom actually really interested in my art these days. But I think art and science is very different, I would say. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think. I wanted to say a couple of things. I wanted to say that, yeah, the process is very important to me, because I don't think art is, I always tell it to my students, you know, that I don't think I'm smart enough to come up with the idea, you know, in my mind and then just to execute it, right? But I came up with the idea, maybe it's not so great. And then I start to make, you know, and when you make, and I'm sure many people here actually know that when you start making things, there is an interactions that happen, right? There is an interaction with the material, accident happen that it's so important and involved in the process of making. And then your decision of how to respond to them, right? How you're dealing with moments of when things not go the way you want, or the material want to do something else and you want it to do, you know, it's almost like a constant fight between the material and yourself and what you decided to do with it. All of those kind of things eventually transform into this object, into this thing that I couldn't imagine and think about it in advance. Right, and more than that, actually, all of those thoughts and moment and time that you spend with this material or with this process, you know, enter into the object. I want to claim, there are people who would say that they disagree with me, of course, right? But I would want to claim that enter into the object. And this is one of the reasons sometimes there is an object that you don't know. One of the reasons that sometimes you see an object that you don't know why, but it's really attractive you. You really want to touch it. You really want to have it. You need it. And sometimes, you know, it's not. It's so. And when I said about like science and art, right? Like, yeah, we both do a research. We both looking for something that we don't know. I think I saw I'm pretty sure I saw him, I think I saw here my friend, Aaron Abram, who is a mathematician. And we had a lot of conversation about yeah, he's here. And we had a lot of conversation about math and art, right?
Oh, we did.
Right, we also, right? And that was came from Aaron, actually, who we tried to figure it out. Like, I always thought that there is such a big difference between math and art. First of all, I'm not sure Aaron will agree with me that math is part of science. So maybe forgive me if I'm mixing things. But since Aaron is here, I would forget about science for a second and talk about math. And I would say that I actually learned that math and art are like the way we think and develop. It's very much connected. It's all abstract. It's abstract thoughts that you actually not sure what you will ending up with, but you allow yourself to go in this rabbit hole, right?
So Rotem, can I just venture in? You're talking about juxtaposing art and science. I want to just throw in a couple of other things that really kept coming back as themes. Art versus craft. That discussion happened academically. I would spend many hours listening to you and Marcia talking about that difference. The concept of apprenticeship really came up strongly in this because we were apprentices in the hands of many people along the way who brought their mastery of a specific way to achieve a good outcome and gave us the recipe. So we weren't able to sit at their elbow for 10,000 hours to develop mastery over dying. But what Tracy did was give that lengthy description right down to grams and time and weights and temperature. And if we followed that mastery, we had a sense of accomplishment together that was amazing. I wouldn't say I'd be comfortable trying it alone, just sort of making it up as I go, because one thing that we did learn was that in certain cases in the achievement of fiber arts, science does matter. It matters a great deal. If you really have no time to experiment and fail or have a dismal result, you better turn to an expert and ask for advice. And then, and only then, can you move on to the next step. And I just wanted to throw that out for your comment, because as a fine artist, a sculptor, you were constantly opening yourself up to handcraft, and joyfully so. And I saw you dignify every single person who came along our path to teach you something as an artist in their own right. And that includes me. And I really want to thank you publicly for that.
Well, you know, Joseph Beuys said, Joseph Beuys, an artist from the beginning for people who is not from the art world, I would just say that Joseph Beuys is an artist from Germany who really shaped the art history in the beginning of the actually after World War II. And he had this sentence that everyone translated differently, but he said that in order to heal this society, it's actually so interesting how much of his text relevant in a way for today. But you know, the society after World War II was falling apart, and he talked about like in order to heal the society, we all need to everyone. How I will say it, I don't want to say it in the way that he didn't. I think what he meant, I will not say his sentence, but I will say what he meant, in my opinion, was that no matter what you do, the way you do it should be like an artist. So in this process of an artist, and that's something that will help heal the society. That's not something that I said, that's something that the way I translate Joseph Beuys, that's what he said. And I do want also to say, because we said science and art, I always feel very ambivalent about this definition, because, you know, for years I thought, oh, science is this and this, and I don't think it does. And for years, you know, sometimes people think they know what is art. I'm not sure what is art, you know, like, it's just like I wanted to propose that actually it's much more complicated, and it's not that scientists going toward one thing, and it's not that they do something in a linear line. I don't think it's that way. Actually, I think it's depend on people, you know. I would tell a joke, like a joke in my family with my mom, if I can say, like, I think it's represented nicely. I remember, like, I was trying to do something in my something that happened accidentally in my studio that I fall in love with. So I tried to produce it again, and I didn't succeed. And I really was obsessive about it. So for a whole year, I tried to really control everything in order to do that thing that happened accidentally in the studio again. Of course, I failed completely. And then I didn't share it with my mom because I didn't think she understand anything about art, right? But one day I was so frustrated in the car, and I'm driving with my mom, and I tell her about that. And she just laughed. And she said, of course you will not succeed to do that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, you know what, she have a lab. And she said, in our lab, we never, when a guest coming to visit our lab, we never show an experiment, because no matter how many times the experiment worked, when a visitor coming to the lab, it never worked. And I'm like, couldn't you tell me that a year ago, right? Like, I'm trying to bring it to the viewer, and I'm not succeeding to do that. So that's all to say that teach me something, right?
This reminds me, Rotem, of our conversation. Our first conversation, I think, lasted for 2 hours.
At least.
Talked a lot about science, and we talked about, you know, I came from a background of science, math, and chemistry, and you know, even the vocabulary of talking about experimentation, you know, I mean, my mind goes off onto many different things. Of course, from this whole conversation, I'll be thinking for days, but right now the word experimentation is stuck in my head. And, you know, you're talking about the things that happen as you're experimenting, and how you try to replicate things, and you know, even just the idea of someone breathing down your neck, making the formula unable to happen. You know, there's I'm also thinking about a couple of comments on the chat too, and I don't know how much longer you want to talk about this. Maybe we can take a couple more comments, but you know, there are a lot of comments on the chat about research, you know, and you know, being researchers, and what is the resonance between art and science, and you know, the understanding of creative research is generally more problematic from the outside than the understanding of scientific research. But you know, and I know, having been an academic and being in an environment that you know, so much of your advancement in the field in an academic institution is based on your ability to turn your creative process into research. And you know, so there's so many, you know, amazing things that are happening in conversations like this that bring so many different things together. So I won't go on anymore onto that tangent, but
can I comment?
Oh yeah, please.
Because when you say that experimentation and what you're saying, you know, first of all, like, at some point as an artist, you know, after I finished trying to satisfy my mother, I just realized that, you know, as an artist, I just have the freedom to invent things. I actually don't have to follow a certain path. And this is part of what I like. But it's more than that. So, okay, so I want to say that, but I also want to mention a different story. And the different story is that before actually I did this mattress, I went to Pipestone because I wanted to learn more about the stone from people who actually have that knowledge, that was generous enough to host me in their shop and tell me stories that associate with it. And at some point, I remember I had his name is Bad. I had a conversation with him when I told him, I asked him, we talked about the past, right? And of course he told me, be careful from saying history, right? The history written by the winner, right? So and we started to talk about the past, and in our both paths, there is many aspects that we actually don't know, that from different reason they're vanished. The knowledge and the culture was vanished. So for example, with my grandma, the Jewish people who wanted to migrate from Libya to Israel in the 50s, the requirement was you leave everything behind, right? And they literally left everything behind. And I'm thinking about it a lot, about this absent, like information that I don't know, right? And this is also why I was so excited about learning that my ancestor actually dyed fabric, right? But the reason I mention it is because I remember at some point I asked Bud at Pipestone, I asked him, tell me how you know what ritual to do, right? He's indigenous person, and they really trying to kind of like found the culture that was lost. And he said, I'm trying to find people and gather story. And he actually collect and make movies and go to interview people. And he said, but still a lot is missing. And when a lot is missing, you need to invent it. You need to trust yourself and invent it. And I'm like, what? Really? And something about what he said, I felt such a relief. I'm like, really? I can trust myself, and that is something that really, really remained with me. I really learned a lot from that sentence, actually.
The other thing he said to you that you and I spoke about one entire afternoon was the comment got made, who are my people? He was the one who said, they're seeking to understand who are my people in this time. And we had across cultures a big discussion about finding our place among people no matter where we are, and figuring out, for the sake of our children, the honoring the memory of people who came before us, how to appreciate culture. And we were doing this in the middle of a very divisive political season where honestly we chose to not talk about that and talk instead about the obligation to make positive ritual, and that art can bring people together, and the scientists are very important to that process, and everybody brings something to the party. And we certainly saw that over and over again. Just when we thought we knew everything we needed to know, we found out questions we didn't know the answer to. And with each person, and I think one of the most powerful things that happened since the project ended, you wrote Larry Garner a handwritten note and sent him a picture of the two of you with the sample mattress. And he told me he will treasure that forever. And that one of the things that happened when the two of you were talking was to realize similarity across half a world away, that you two had so much in common. And I think that speaks to a bit of what Bud was saying to you from the tribal perspective in Pipestone, is finding people, finding who my people are, and then finding other people to share openly with, and be comfortable in that. And it was a very big part of this project that had everything to do with that mattress, and all the time. Words fail because it was such a big outcome.
I just want to mention that Becky wrote, and I absolutely agree with her. Tracy, do you want to read? Like,
No, well, if you're paying attention, go for it.
Just for, I now noticed, you know, we talking, just Becky wrote that, and those creative practices have their roots in different culture practices. And this is very true, right? Like, different technique and different things, but still, like, people work with fabric, people work, that's, yeah, I think it's very true.
Oops, I just muted myself. So if anyone else, we're at about 7:45 right now, which is fine. The chat, somebody else just contributed to the chat. This is sort of the time where everybody's kind of wraps up. I think I would like to wrap up. I have to say, you know, listening to this process and meeting Rotem and what I know, knowing Wendy, you know, I think Wendy just said it, that, you know, words don't work when you try to describe something like this that happens. What a phenomenal experience. And what it's doing for me is it's making me have my own memories as this whole thing has gone on about my own phenomenal experiences. And I can't quite put my finger on exactly what they are, but I have felt this energy about the connection that you have brought forward to the public through this conversation. So I don't, you know, I mean, I'm so happy. So I can't thank you guys enough for joining us for this phenomenal conversation at Textile Center and with, you know, through Textile Center this evening. And, you know, I'm never quite sure what's going to happen with any of the Art Speaks programs, but it's such a, you know, it's a joy in my position at Textile Center to be able to work with such sharing and open people. You know, Wendy, you've shouted out several times, you know, like you just called me and I said, oh yeah, I'm in. You know, this is the kind of stuff that makes my job an absolute joy and a pleasure. And I wish it was, you know, I wish it was all I had to do. But I want to say, you know, to everyone, I'll let everyone know who registered for the session when the conversation is available online. We'll be sharing it with the 3 presenters initially to make sure that it's, you know, good to go. And we will post it on our website because I think that this is, you know, something that should be shared out with a much larger public than was able to attend this evening. So thank you. I mean, it just, to me, this feels kind of like, on some strange way, the word groundswell is in my head. You know, it's like one of these conversations that starts potentially a dozen other very meaningful conversations. And so I can't thank you guys enough. Do you have any last words, the 3 presenters, before we sign off for the evening?
Well, I can tell you, I can't wait to see that mattress in person.
Yes. Can we have it at the Textile Center? We're gonna talk about this. We'll figure it out.
I absolutely have. I have an ongoing obligation to network this into some kind of a presence here in the Twin Cities. We have to negotiate with Oliver. I must tell you, I think I'm the perfect person to do it. He and I'll just have to take a tractor ride and have a little conversation. But I'd love for it to be able to be available and be seen, and to connect Rotem in person to people in this community who need to know her and welcome her in to a bigger community of artists. And, you know, Mike, you know, I hope to see you in person someday soon too.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you as well.
And I'm going to give a really quick shout out to Stoveworks, which is Mike's, I want to call it one of your curatorial projects. So Liz Miller, one of our inaugural McKnight Fellows, is going to be doing a residency where Mike is stationed out there in Tennessee. So the connections are really amazing, and they happen fast and furiously sometimes. And, you know, I feel like every time somebody talks to me about something, I'm like, oh my God. It's just, like I said earlier, the world gets smaller or bigger, depending on how you look at it. So thank you, everybody. We're going to end it there, and I will be in touch with everybody in the audience about the video when it's ready, and also to the presenters to continue to stay in touch with you guys.
I just want to say one more time, thank you, first of all, to the Textile Center for hosting this event, and to Tracy. You were amazing all along. And Mike and Wendy, I so appreciate that you agreed to join that conversation. It's mean a lot to me.
Of course. May I just add one thing? What if, because I think that reading list
We
is
will not finish ever today. Yes.
I know, I'm sorry. That reading list is important. Maybe that could be provided to Tracy. So if people wanted to you know, peruse the various texts, they could.
Oh, yeah, we can do that.
Absolutely. Yep, we can do it. All right. We will all be in touch. Appreciate everybody. Thank you. Have a
Bye.
great
Good
night.
Thank
Bye.
you.